There's another category in the exceptions. It's called extraordinary circumstances. And these are factors that directly affect your ability to file for asylum. Okay? As I say, the burden of proof is on the applicant. You must show that the circumstances that came about were not intentionally created by the person or the applicant, either through action or inaction. All right. So if they can show factors that affected their ability to file for asylum, they would get an exception to the 1-year period. So a good example is if they get into a car accident toward the end of the 1-year period and they're hospitalized for several months, and that carries over beyond the 1-year period, they would have a reasonable period of time after the 1-year period has ended to be able to file for asylum and be considered timely based upon these extraordinary circumstances. Being involved in a car accident, death in the family.
Judge, what about mental health issues relating to their trauma, their persecution?
Yeah, certainly if you can show that post-traumatic stress disorder or any type of incident or a circumstance that affects your memory or your ability to recall, you would have a reasonable period of time from discovery that you needed to file an asylum application to do so. So let's say car accident again. You're medically traumatized and you have short-term memory loss. Eventually, it comes back. It may come back, months later. It may come back a half year later. But whenever it comes back and you realize that you have an asylum claim, you have a reasonable period of time after that. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a good one. If the person is suffering mentally, and or physically as a result of the persecution that happened to them in the past, and they're unable to function and go see a lawyer to fill out an asylum application, that could be an extraordinary circumstance where they would be given a reasonable period of time to file.
Judge, okay. What if somebody just doesn't know about it? I mean, I know in communities people talk about it, and so a lot of people do know you have to file within 1 year, but is it possible that somebody might not know?
Well, that would depend upon the evidence that's shown to you as the adjudicator. And you would ask the question. You would, the government, I'm sure, would ask the question, and you as the immigration judge would ask the individual, well, why did you wait 18 months to file your asylum application after the expiration of the 1 year period? And based upon their explanation, just like based upon their claim of asylum, you have to determine their credibility. You have to determine their claim, whether it's reasonable. If the person says, "Oh, I just forgot," that's not an exception. If they say, "I didn't even know until I started getting my memory back," and they have medical documentation to show that they've suffered from short-term memory loss, then you have to make that adjudication. You have to make that determination whether it was within a reasonable period of time, given the circumstances of what happened to them or what is happening to them.
Let me give folks an example. We had a really interesting case where she was a Falun Gong practitioner, which is a philosophy and practice that's heavily banned in China. And one of her colleagues or fellow practitioners told her, you have to file on the 1 year mark. And so she thought about that, and then she actually met another practitioner who she accompanied him to the post office as he was filing on the 1 year mark. And so she just naturally thought that that's what she had to do. But then there were delays, but she brought witnesses, and the judge says, okay, hopefully next time you get a lawyer, when you file that thing, we weren't hired for the original filing. We got the court case, but she was able to get granted based on the judge's finding.
Yeah. that'll bring me to a topic that we're going to discuss later. But the question is, under extraordinary circumstances, you can file within a reasonable period of time. So what is a reasonable period of time? We talked about serious illness, mental or physical disability that prevents you from filing. You would have a reasonable period of time. After that period of time, as we talked about, say, post-traumatic stress disorder or mental disability or physical disability or death in the family that prevents you from concentrating on what you need to do for your asylum application. There is legal disability that's specified in the regulations. And this is, let's say, somebody who's an unaccompanied minor who comes to the United States and doesn't file within the 1-year period. If they're under the age of 21, which is what the immigration authority says is the definition of a child, right? In the regulations, if they're under 21, they're under a legal disability, but they need to file within a reasonable period of time after they turn 21, right? They can't file at age 25 and say, I didn't know because I was a kid. They give you the exception, but it ends at the age of 21.
Judge, is there a ballpark as to what is reasonable? We know that 1 year is not. You don't have an additional year to file, but
there is congressional intent that says 6 months, and I'll get to that particular how that falls within this 1 year exception too. A big one is ineffective assistance of counsel.
Mm-hmm.
If your lawyer gives you bad advice about the 1 year period, or if your lawyer fails to represent you in an effective way that protects your ability to file. For instance, he says, oh, you don't have to worry about it. You're in removal proceedings. We don't have to file until much later. Wrong advice, misadvice. Telling you, oh, you don't have to go to the proceedings because nothing's going to happen. And we'll get a later date for the merits of your case, whatever that merits hearing that'll be set up by the court. And you don't file within the 1 year period of time. Where the attorney is either given bad advice or no advice and fails to advise you of your obligation to file within the 1 year period of time, that could be a basis, a reasonable basis, an equitable basis, as determined by the courts, to be excused from the 1 year filing period and permit you to file within a reasonable period of time. Again, the question is, when do you discover that ineffective assistance of counsel? And was your filing within a reasonable period of time of that discovery? So usually that happens when you go to another attorney, immigration attorney, much more experienced, who advises you, hey, you missed the 1 year filing period. And the person says, but the person I had never told me that there was one.
Wow.
So, and it happens.